Hello colorful quilters, and welcome back to Color Girl Quilts on YouTube. I'm so happy that you're here today, and I couldn't be more excited to share with you another video in our series using the Classic Curves ruler to make curved piecing quick and easy. Yes, curved piecing can be easy. Today's video is all about orange peel blocks. We are going to make a 6-inch orange peel. I'm going to show you how to do the cutting with the ruler, the piecing, the trimming and squaring up your blocks to make some just like mine. So get out your favorite fabrics, whether it's brights and black and whites like mine or your own favorite collection, and I hope that you'll sew along with me. This video is part of a series using the Classic Curves ruler. If you're just tuning in and you're new to curved piecing or you haven't used the ruler before, please look for the other videos in this series. I do have a beginner one that shows you around the Classic Curves ruler, how to use it, what the markings are for, and getting started on a basic block. So be sure and tune into that video as well to help you get started. But today we are going to get right to it, making our 6-inch orange peel blocks, adding to this little collection to make a full quilt. Okay, thanks for sewing along with me. Let's get started. Okay, this is the cutting instructions using the Classic Curves ruler to make an orange peel block. We are going to be cutting with the 6-inch groove on the ruler, so this is going to make a 6-inch unfinished, 5.5-inch finished square. Okay, so the first of all, we are going to cut the orange peel, the melon shape, and you'll notice that since that forms the convex shape of your block, we are going to use the lines on the ruler that correspond with the convex shape. So what I'm paying attention to as I cut, this is the convex lines where they cross the 6-inch cutting groove. Okay, so for these blocks, instead of cutting them with color, I'm going to cut them with black and white and make some that are the opposite of my original block. So these are going to have a black and white center and colored corners. Okay, so to cut a 6-inch melon shape, I am going to start with a strip of fabric that's 8.5 inches wide. Okay, I'm going to place my ruler on the fabric at an angle like you see here. Okay, and like I told you before, since I'm cutting the convex shape, I'm going to follow the line for that shape out to the 6-inch groove and make sure that the end of that is lined up with the edge of my fabric. And then the same thing on the other side. The end of the 6-inch groove should be lined up with the edge of your fabric. And if I follow that across the groove, I can see where the topmost point is and slide that as close as possible to the end of my fabric so that I can make the most of my fabric and not waste a lot. Okay, so I'm going to be cutting through this groove right here at 6 inches. This is going to form one side of my orange peel. Okay, so I have a scrap there, and then I'll turn the fabric around and do the same thing on the other side. Again, since I'm cutting the convex shape, I'm going to follow those lines out to where the 6-inch groove is and line that up with the edge of my fabric. This time I also want to make sure that it's lined up with the ends of the curve that I just cut. So as you can see, the line for the convex shape and the 6-inch groove lines up at the end of the curve that I cut. And I'll cut that shape again. Cut that. Okay, and what I'm going to do is continue to do that. This was sort of a small piece. I think I can fit one more shape here. But if I have full width of fabric strips, depending on the size, I can cut quite a few of these shapes along the length of my strip. Okay, let's see if this is going to fit. Might be just slightly too small. Let's see. Oh, it fits on there okay. There's a tiny bit of the selvage, the little holes for the selvage, but I think that's going to be inside my seam allowance, so I'm going to go ahead and use this piece. Okay, so that gives me a couple of those. I'll do the same thing with as many fabrics as I want for variety or for the size quilt that I want to make. Each one of these, of course, will make one orange peel square. Oh, let's move on to cutting the two shapes for the background, the corners of the square. Now, as you can probably guess, since the melon or the orange peel shape was the convex, the corner pieces are going to be the concave shape. So I am going to use the concave symbol lines on the ruler to cut this piece. Okay, so I want to make sure that, again, that I'm using the 6-inch groove and the lines on the ruler. For this one, I'm going to start with a 7-inch square and fold it on the diagonal. And now I cut 3/4 inch. Make sure that your folded square is set at a right angle like this. It should not be like this. It shouldn't be like a mountain. It should be like a 90-degree angle. So that when you cut your 3/4 inch, you're cutting at a right angle to the straight sides of your triangle. Okay, so that's 3/4 inch. And same thing on the other end, 3/4 inch from the folded corner. And leaving my piece folded, I'm going to take the ruler and place it so that those ends that I just cut line up with the lines on the ruler for cutting the concave shape. So I have one here and one here, and you can see that my cutting groove at 6 inches should hit pretty close to the corner where it's folded, where I cut those ends off. All right, and then I'll cut that 6-inch, and make sure that you're always cutting for this one with the concave shape. Okay, it needs to be lined up with that inside line. Okay, so that gives me 2 of those, and that will be the 2 corners to go with my orange peel shape. I think I'm going to cut a variety of colors so that I can mix and match rather than having the same color on both sides. You can choose to do a bunch that are the same or do them in pairs like I just showed you so that you have the same color on both sides. I'm going to cut a variety so that I can mix and match and have pieces that have different colors and they're kind of mixed up. I think that that will be cute in my finished project. So let's see how these are going to look. So here's some with different colors. Okay, so that's how these are going to go together. Lots of different bright colors with the black and white centers. All right, let's go ahead and start piecing these. Okay, for the piecing step, you are going to need 2 of your shapes, your inside orange peel shape and one of your corner shapes, and you're going to need some pins. Okay, so first of all, I am going to fold one shape in half and mark the place at the center of the curve just by pinching it to create a crease in the fabric. And then fold the end into the center to mark the halfway on both sides. Okay, and then I'll take my corner piece and do the same. Fold it and crease to find the center and match that up with that center crease on my first fabric. And then fold the end into the center and crease to find the halfway and match that up with the crease on my white fabric. and pin. Same thing on the other side. And match up those points again. Okay, next I'm going to take the ends of the curve and pin them together. You'll see how that they should line up here. The edges of the fabric on both corners should line up there straight. On both ends. All right, and this gives us a piece that is now ready to sew. Let's go to the sewing machine and do some piecing. Okay, we are at the sewing machine now and ready to sew that piece that we just pinned. All right, I have my sewing machine set at a 1/4 inch seam, my needle in place for that. And I'm just going to place my fabric just like I ordinarily would under the presser foot and take a couple of stitches. I'm going to set my machine at needle down because I like for any time I stop sewing the needle to stay down and my presser foot pops up just slightly. It makes it easy to make adjustments as I go and also to remove my pins. Okay, and then I'm just holding the top fabric between my thumb and forefinger so that I can guide it back and forth to stay matched up with the fabric underneath. I want to make sure that those edges stay together. I'll stop as I approach each pin and take those out. And continue to use the tips of my fingers to guide it. Make sure that you take your time on this. There's no rush. You'll get faster the more that you sew curves, and pretty soon you'll be pretty speedy. But to start out with, so that you have success right away, I recommend that you take it slowly and get a feel for how to feed the fabric through the machine to avoid any folds and puckers. Sometimes those pins are kind of hard to pull out. There we go. Okay, keep those ends lined up as I approach the end of the seam. And if I'm chain piecing a bunch of them at once, I can go ahead and just add the next one and keep on going and piecing several of these at once to get a little stack of them before I go to the ironing board and press them. And we are back. You can see that I have pressed a couple of these blocks, and I press outward toward the concave shape, toward the corner fabric. I find that that makes the blocks lay a little bit flatter in the end and have less puffiness if I press toward the concave versus inward. Okay, so all of these are pressed that same way. First thing that I need to do before I can pin the other side of my background fabric to the other side of my shape and get that sewn is, first of all, I need to trim my shape back again to the 6-inch curve. Okay, so again, since this is going to be the convex shape, I am going to line the edges of my fabric up with the lines on the ruler for the convex cutting shape and the 6-inch cutting groove. So as you can see, it trims a little bit down to make sure that the curved edge is the correct length to fit into the other piece that I cut with the 6-inch groove. Okay, so I've got that lined up. I've got about the same amount of fabric that I'm trimming off at both ends. You want to make sure that that is the way that it is, rather than cutting a lot off of one side and not very much off of the other. I always wanted balance, and I've got about 1/8 of an inch on each end. So I'm going to cut through the 6-inch groove, and that gives me my piece that is now the right length to fit with the other side that I already cut with the 6-inch groove like I showed you before. Okay, the process for doing the other side is going to be exactly the same. I'm going to crease and pin these pieces together and then sew them, and I'll end up with my completed block. So I will go ahead and sew these few blocks, press them, and be back to show you how they look all finished. And then I'll show you how to square them all up so that you have nice, perfect 6-inch squares. Okay, we are back at the cutting table now with our finished orange peel block, and it's time now to trim and square our blocks. The reason that we do this is because a lot of times with curved piecing, your shapes will get a little bit distorted from sewing the bias edge, the curve, as well as pressing it. So you can see these are pretty good. They're fairly square, but there's some little bulges here and there on the sides. And I want to make sure that I have really nice square blocks and an even seam allowance around my points, so that when I go to sew them together, they come together nicely and look really straight in my finished quilt. Okay, so since I'm making 6-inch blocks, I am going to square these to 6 inches, and they'll finish 5.5 in my eventual quilt. Okay, so the first things to make sure that you remember is that you want to make sure that you're cutting an equal amount of fabric around the entire block. So we're not going to just take like the 6 inches and put it on one side and cut it off. Imagine that you're cutting a 6-inch square out of the center of your block, okay? And that's going to give us a nice even square with straight sides and uniform seam allowance between all of our blocks. Okay, so first of all, as you can see, I have my 6-inch lines on my ruler here, so that's going to be my square. I want to look at the points of my curved shape, and I'm going to be leaving approximately 3/8 of an inch to the outside of each one. So if I start with one side, I'm going to place the 1/2 inch point on my ruler just inside that pieced point on my fabric. I'm going to show you that up close. Okay, can you see where I have my 1/2 inch point is right here where my finger is? And I want that to be really close to, but just inside of the pieced point of my orange peel block. That's going to give me about 3/8 of an inch on both sides. Okay, and then if I look to the other side, the other corner of my block, it should be at nearly the same position. Let's see, here is my 6-inch mark, so I need to go in a little bit. And you can see there's the 1/2 inch. So if I place it right there, I've got a little less than 3/8 inch, and then I can just keep adjusting until I have that one. Let's see, I've got it a little, I gotta just adjust that. So I want that one to be just inside, you see that point there, and this one to be just inside. Okay, so that I'm cutting off so that I'm keeping about 3/8 of an inch on both ends of the point of my curved shape. First, I'm going to cut the two sides here, and then I can turn my piece around and position it in the same way. So I've got my 6-inch lines here. Okay, so 6-inch lines on the straight sides I just cut. And then just to double check my placement that I have it the same as I did before, you can see that that 1/2 inch point is just inside the end of the curved seam, and it's the same here. So I'm leaving approximately 3/8 inch to the outside of the curve on both sides, and then I can cut the other two sides. So this gives me a nice, straight, perfect 6-inch square, so that when I go to sew these together with the other blocks that I've sewn, you can see I did the same thing with the 3/8 inch. They are going to fit together nicely, and I'm going to get really pretty curves. And they're nice and square. Okay, so go ahead and trim all of your blocks the same way. Remember, they need to be 6 inches, and you're going to have 3/8 inches of fabric to the outside of your curved corners. And then they're ready to sew together. Okay, what do you think? We made some super cute blocks today. I hope that you enjoyed sewing them too, and that you will make a whole bunch of these and make a beautiful quilt. I wanted to just really quickly before we go, see how these are going to start looking as we put them together. I'm going to alternate my color on black and white blocks with my black and white on color blocks. So let's see how these look. Oh, that one goes right there. Gotta alternate. Let's see. Okay, I don't have these right. Oh, here we go. All right, so look how fun that's looking so far. I think I'm going to make my quilt 30 blocks. So I will need 15 of each type. So 15 of the black and white with color on the outside and 15 of the color with black and white on the outside. And that'll give me a quilt that's 6 blocks by 5 blocks. So it's going to be pretty small, just kind of a little baby quilt, but a fun one to get you started on curved piecing and making orange peel blocks. Once you make these, you are going to be so good at curved piecing, you'll be ready to try something more difficult. Make sure that you visit colorgirlquilts.com to get your classic curves ruler. You'll also find the fabrics that I'm using here on the website if you want to make one like mine, and lots of other tutorials using the classic curves ruler. I hope that you've enjoyed making these blocks, and be sure and show me what you make. I would love to see how you're doing with curved piecing. Be sure and subscribe to Color Girl Quilts on YouTube. Press the subscribe button so that you'll know about all of the videos that come along. We're going to continue working on this series of curved piecing and lots of others. Okay, until next time, I'll see you.